Dusty Lindsay, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Justin. It's great to be here.
It is great. Like your mug there, man. It's nice.
Yeah.
Hey, we look forward to this. But first, before we jump into our conversation today, I just want to tell you, man, you are my favorite youth pastor. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Dude, I've
been your only youth pastor for a long time.
I have a student, I have a child in the youth ministry now. That was kind of an eye-opener for me. Like, wow, got a kid in the youth ministry. Anyway, we appreciate you, man. You really are. We're so thankful. Our church is blessed by you. And I do love you for a lot of reasons, but I've enjoyed our conversations over the years, and I think this will be a fun one. We're kind of going off the heels of Wes and Greg kind of did a kickoff to the fruit of the Spirit, and I wanted to start by just reading a quote from Greg. He kind of gave a summary of that episode. Do you mind if I read that for us?
Yeah, sure.
All right, so Greg said, "The flesh is ridiculously strong, and most people never get to the place where they experience any of the fruit because they won't do the hard work of admitting what the flesh is and agreeing it has to go." And I like that because I thought, now we'll kind of dive into some of the fruit of the Spirit, and we're kicking off with gentleness. So what do you think, Dusty? How would you define gentleness? And then we can get into maybe kind of tying in that quote from Greg and how do we connect some dots by whether or not we have that in our life.
I do agree with Greg that the flesh can get in the way of the Spirit. And I look at the fruit of the Spirit as it's us walking in the Spirit, and the opposite of walking in the Spirit is walking in the flesh. And I think it's hard to experience those. I think what Greg mentioned, it's the manifestation of walking in the Spirit is this list that comes after that. I believe it's difficult to experience that if we're so caught up in walking in the flesh and not turning over the flesh and choosing to walk into the Spirit and practicing walking in the Spirit. So there's a whole list. There's a whole list there of things that we make choices. And it's things that God wants from us because I believe He's going to use those things in the lives of other people as people witness our life and as we practice that list of things. I believe it's something that God can use in the life of other people. Matter of fact, just like I was on a phone call, I talked to my wife, talked to Kristen about this just this morning. Had a phone call from someone. And I just said, I don't even know this person very well, but I just said, it has to do with this whole gentleness kind of concept too. I said, I just love talking to this person because they're just so humble, and just they're kind of gentle people, and they're not super high, not super low. And they just respond well, and they're just super even keel, And so I don't know anything about this person, but if I were to make an assumption, it seems as if I wonder if there's someone who follows Jesus,
because they're displaying that.
Because they're displaying that evidence of possible fruit of their life.
That's good. All right, so you were talking about just referencing that. What Greg kind of summarized there about our flesh, and it gets in the way we're in our flesh. Is it fair then to ask, if we're going to ask, before we can know what gentleness is, do we need to know what the opposite is? Maybe we're more in tune with our fleshly side than the spirit side.
Oh, 100%,
so what would you consider the opposite of gentleness? What do we, maybe that'll help us.
Well, let me tell you a real quick story.
All right.
So if I were going to write a book about, say, Conway, because you drive into Conway and you see those three columns. It says city of colleges, right? If I was going to write a book about Conway, I would title it the city of roundabouts, right? Because we all know about Conway and roundabout. Well, so talking about the flesh, you know what I'm talking?
Yeah.
I was kids were in the car. Kristen was there. I'm driving through the one by Sam's, and I yield at the yield sign, and I'm starting to come through the roundabout, and this truck just almost runs right into me. Lays on the horn, waves at me with one finger, and I wave back with all my fingers. And this dude was just mad. And so you're talking about the flesh, and I just erupted. Like I was angry. Yep. I mean, it was a reaction. And he took off. I took off after him. I mean, I was going down the interstate on my horn. He was making gestures at me. I wasn't making gestures at him. I mean, I have a little bit of self-control, not much that day, but a little bit, not to do that in front of my kids, right? But I'm telling you, you know what's crazy? Like a month later, I was going through the same roundabout, and they put up another yield sign in the middle of that roundabout. They put up another yield sign.
No.
They had to do it within the month, right?
Yeah.
Well, it turns out I was in the wrong.
Oh, wow.
There are 2 yield signs in that roundabout.
Okay.
So I was in the wrong. I was in the flesh, and I let my flesh overcome me. There was nothing gentle. And so that reminds me, that before I react to something, I probably need to have a little self-evaluation. Like where am I in the wrong? And that experience always reminds me that before I react, before I respond to something, I better make sure that I'm not in the wrong. And by me making that pause, talking about gentleness, by me making that pause and reflecting, it gives me that thought of, okay, how is the proper way to respond? Even if I wasn't in the wrong, what is the proper way to respond to this scenario, to this situation?
That's wild, man. That makes me think too that we can talk about gentleness all day, and that's great until conflict arises. Like you have that situation, someone's waving at you in an unkind manner, someone's laying on their horn. That's where it's going to get exposed. And I appreciate you sharing that story, man, because that's real. We've all been there.
Well, I think gentleness is in there because of conflict.
Yep.
I mean, if there's no conflict, if there's no risk of losing our temper, then we're always going to, it's guaranteed to respond in a positive way, in a gentle way. But gentleness is in there because I believe God knows that we're going to experience conflict.
So as gentleness is one, this is kind of fun. I hadn't thought about this, but just listening to you talk, is gentleness slowing my life down enough in my thoughts, my speech, my reactions, my actions? Is it just the ability to slow down so that I can respond in a way? Like, is gentleness that thing that's kind of that protector that where normally if I'm fleshly, it's just an instant reaction. Yeah. It's just instant. But gentleness is that thing that is that the system that's in place that God's given us to kind of.
I think you're honest. I think that's a good practice for us to pause and to think before we respond. But I think the fruit of the Spirit, gentleness, I believe the definition, if you look that up, it is power or authority under control. And I think that pause that we make ourselves, we practice that, we get used to doing that pause, is going to help us evaluate, okay, how do I respond to this? Yep. I knew a guy a while back, and he had an insane ability. It was really kind of uncomfortable talking to him because you would talk to this guy, and he would always have a very awkward silence before he responded to anything, like any question. No, it wasn't even conflict. He would always just have this real awkward silence, almost as if he was evaluating what is the best approach to answering this situation, or just in any conversation. Yep. And it was kind of awkward, but it taught me that, man, we should pause. We should take a breath before, especially in conflict, and I think where gentleness probably needs to be lived out more than anywhere is in our homes, like with our children, with our spouses, because I mean, it's in the home where you feel like it's not seen. But that's where conflict can just erupt into things that aren't good,
And likely where you'll be tested in ways that you're not tested elsewhere.
Because you're with these people all the time.
The people you love the most are the ones that can drive you the craziest.
And you feel the freedom to let, like, there seems to be less risk in your home than in the business. If you're if you're at work or something like that, if you explode at work, well, there's going to be some consequences of that. If you're at home, there's going to be consequences, but you're not going to lose it. You're not going to lose something over it unless it's out of control. But I do think that, like, in our homes, gentleness should be more evident there than anywhere else.
Yep.
You know?
Yep. No, I agree. That's great. If we can't display it there, how are we ever going to display it elsewhere? That's great. Let me ask you this, because I feel like when it comes to gentleness, I think of what Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, blessed are the meek, right? You have this idea the world would consider gentleness, meekness weak.
Yeah.
Right? So how do we find the balance of, like, I want to be gentle, but if I'm not careful, maybe out of fear of me losing my control, there's a situation, there's a conversation that really does need to happen, but I want to be gentle, so now I'm just going to avoid it because, I don't know how to. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
because certainly gentleness doesn't mean we avoid conflict.
No,
we don't run from it. We do deal with it. But how do we find that balance of, I want to deal with this, but I don't want to be, you mentioned this earlier, too high, too low. Like I want that maybe that's a good gentleness, is that steadiness. You meet people like, I think of Mike, man. Mike says he's steady.
Yeah.
Like I love that about him. How do we protect ourselves maybe on going into a ditch of that, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think we need to have the confidence in ourselves to know that we get to make choices in every situation. Like I was told, no, don't let anybody take advantage of you. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like the world's, like you said, the world's definition of meekness or gentleness is letting people, you're gonna get run over if you're gentle, and that's just not true, because here's the deal. I have confidence to know that I don't have to address this situation, but I have the choice, and I can make a decision in this situation. I can withdraw. I can make a choice to withdraw. I can make a choice to address it, and I have the freedom to choose for myself what I need to do in this situation. That doesn't mean I have to make the choice at that moment.
Yeah.
But meekness is not weakness. Meekness is actually a form of strength. It's actually a form of control. It's actually a form of, I have the ability to make a decision, but I'm choosing not to because I'm concerned about the outcome of this situation. And by me not making a decision in this moment means that I'm going to let something play out, or I'm going to learn from this situation, or let someone else, like take my kids for instance. There's been times in my home where I haven't been gentle. Right? If I'm just being honest.
Sure. No.
I'm up to here, and I'm tired especially when they're little. Not so much now, but especially when they're little and they're fighting and bickering back and forth. There were times, man, I'd raise my voice. I'd call them out in the hallway, and I'd lay it down, you know? And you know what I've learned? You know what I learned over the...
What's that?
That didn't work out for the outcome that I was looking for. Because I feel like that when I did that, I feel like I lost a little respect from them. Whereas if I've learned from that, and I changed in how I started parenting my children. And I noticed that when I would come at them in a firm but self-controlled, not elevated, but very firm and slow and very articulate, that I got a better outcome every single time.
What I hear you saying, that's actually
every single
more
time.
Effective and more powerful. It reminds me of a couple years ago, I was watching a football game, youth football game, and one of the kids fumbled the ball, and the coach is just screaming, hold on to the ball, it just and I remember thinking, that coach feels really good about himself right now, but it's totally ineffective with helping that young boy actually do what he wants him to do. Because he didn't instill any. We can go on, but to your point, I think you're right. Like, what that kid needed wasn't a coach to yell the obvious thing.
Yeah.
Like, I know that. Like, I know I'm supposed to hold him.
Yeah.
What detail did that kid miss? What happened that caused that fumble? What can the coach say? Hey, look, you got this. Here's something we missed. Or like, to your point, to come in, we're gonna still call it. It was a mistake. I'm not asking the coach to act like it wasn't a mistake, but it was a mistake. But let's find a way to do so that actually is a beneficial way. So I hear you, man.
Yeah,
I think,
let's find a way to learn from it. Let's not dwell on the recent past.
Yeah.
Let's find a way. How do we get to a productive future
And maybe-
from what happened?
and I think that's people act like gentleness is something that's just not effective. But I hear you, man. I think the fruit of the Spirit is the power of God. It is the Spirit of God. So of course it works.
Yeah.
Hey, isn't that amazing? And I appreciate you being honest about that. I agree with you, man. I've had moments in the home. It's like, I'm not being gentle. Okay, so here's my question. We obviously want the fruit of the Spirit. We know the flesh is going to get in the way. We are going to have moments of the flesh coming out. How do I recognize, especially in the home? Like, we don't want to fail in the home. As a husband, as a dad, that's obviously going to extend into the workplace, our neighborhood. But it starts here. How do I recognize if I because sometimes we're deceived, and sometimes we act like we're good. We don't even realize we've become the opposite of gentleness. Are there some things that I can kind of pay attention to maybe go, okay, wait, like a check and balance? How do I know if I'm off?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I mean, my first thought of that is just listen to yourself. Like, is the habit of the way I speak to my kids, the way I speak to my wife, the way I speak to my players, the way I speak to my coworkers, is the habit of my life, or my speech and my tone, is it always negative? Is it always elevated? Is it always quick? What's the passage of scripture? Be
quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry.
Like is and what's the other one about peace? Do our part about making peace with everyone.
Oh,
Yeah. I mean, like, is the habit of my reaction, is it always negative? Does it always send? If I'm always being upset and I'm always elevated and I'm always raising my voice, then that's probably a good sign that I'm struggling. I'm struggling in the area of gentleness. Or am I able to have an emotion inside and to slow down, to breathe, and to control that emotion so that emotion, it's okay to be angry.
Yeah.
It's okay to have emotions inside. I mean, God made us to have emotions, right?
Yeah.
But am I able to control that? And that's another fruit of the Spirit, is self-control. Am I able to control that in a way that when it comes out and I address it, is it something that leads to something good and not and not something that causes more friction and more conflict, because I think you can address conflict. I think you can address it in a way that doesn't add stress to the situation, but actually brings stress down. I think that's actually the best way to address conflict. Now, I'm not saying I've been perfect in all that, but
you're learning. But you're
I'm
paying
learning.
attention.
It's like, okay, if me and my wife are yelling at each other, does that lead to a good result or a bad result? At the end of the day, it's never left us in a good place, right?
Yeah.
But when we calm down and take a breath and we actually address the situation, emotion inside, okay, whether we're angry or whatever it is, and we address it in a low, in a even keel way, we can actually have a conversation. We can actually share our true feelings with each other.
What's that proverb? A gentle answer turns away wrath.
Yeah.
But a harsh word stirs up anger. Like, that's that opposite word where I was trying to, like, harsh. That.
Yeah.
What have you seen in your life? I appreciate you being honest, and look, we're all there. We've all had moments of being harsh, whether it's our speech, our action, our attitudes. Like, we all can go there, because sadly we do have to wrestle that war between flesh and spirit. But you've also had victory. You've had moments where you might have been tempted to respond harshly, but you're like, no, and you chose gentleness. And I love how you challenge us to think, we do have a choice, and that's the power of the Spirit of God inside of us, right? Like, that is an option for us. What are some benefits you've seen to gentleness, whether it's in your life or just as you've watched the world?
Yeah.
What are benefits to gentleness, but also consequences of harsh and the opposite of all things gentle?
Yeah, I think of the word. I think we got to be careful and remember your question, because I want to get back to that if I don't address it here. I think we got to be careful, because if we see gentleness as never addressing something, then we become passive. Okay. Now, I think there's I think there's danger in that. And I have wrestled with, okay, what's the line between being too passive and being gentle, right?
That's a great
You know
question.
what I'm saying? Because you know, we live in a world today. I mean, just turn on the news, you know, you flip back and forth between news stations. It's like everybody has to have an opinion. And everybody has to share their opinion at a level that's not productive and for discussion.
Is it fair to say we live in two extremes: extreme harsh or total passivity?
Yes, completely. Yeah, that's right.
That's a great observation.
And usually, what do we say about extremes? Usually, two extremes are never where you're supposed to live.
Yeah, they're both ditches that are completely unhealthy.
Exactly, and I think that's a good example of that. But you know, we live in a world where everybody has to share their opinion about everything, and a lot of people share their opinion when they don't have all the facts.
Yep.
You know, but they think they do, and they think that their opinion matters more than anything else, and so they share it in such an elevated way that it gets people stirred up, and nobody takes the time to just pause. And just consider the other person. You know, do nothing else, selfish ambition or vacancy. But what does it say? Consider others better than yourselves. Where's that at in conflict? You know,
that's good.
We live in a world where no. If we're in conflict, I'm going to fight my battles, and I'm not going to consider yours. You know, well, living in a gentle way means I need to take time to pause and evaluate this relationship. That this relationship is more important than the conflict that we're in. And I need to actually consider, you know, so I think that's one of the dangers is if I value winning a conflict over my relationship with you.
Which is getting, I think you're nailing our consequence. That's the consequence of it, is that the lack of it, there's no hope in a harsh world or in a passive world. Both lead us to different ditches, but nonetheless, both destructive. Which I think it kind of helps us establish one of the greatest benefits is, you know, keep referencing the Sermon on the Mount for something, but blessed are the peacemakers.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, is that not our role to help bring peace into our home and extend that beyond? And there is a benefit to that. I mean, we saw from the proverb, a gentle answer turns away wrath, which means in moments of conflict, like this thing's about to go south or go which way ever we want to look at it. And gentleness is the thing that can just, we need more of that.
Yeah, and we don't have to answer every conflict the moment that it happens. Like we got to realize that. And I go back to marriage. You know, sometimes it feels like if there's a conflict in a marriage, that we have to answer it right now. You know, like if I don't get the result that I want right now, then that's a problem. You know. And I just don't think that's a gentle way to approach a conflict in a marriage. You know, like I say, I mean, of anybody, we should value the relationship with our spouses more than we value winning a conflict with our spouse.
That's right.
You know, and so you know, tabling a conversation, tabling a conflict, I think is a gentle approach because it gives both of us time to just chill out. To think about being considerate about the other person and their opinion and their value, what the value they're bringing to the conversation. And here's the deal: we may end in a disagreement, but because I value the relationship, I think a gentle approach to my wife, because I value the relationship more than the conflict. I need to be okay with just being different on things, because I care about her, and I think she cares about me more than winning a conflict, more than winning a conversation about a disagreement that we have. And sometimes I think being gentle means you keep your mouth shut. I'm just being honest. Like, is every battle worth a fight? Or is every fight worth a battle? Whatever
I know
it is.
what you mean.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It may not be. Like, you know, what's the phrase? You know, we need to choose which hill we're going to die on. And I'm not talking about just with our spouses, but just in life in general.
Yeah.
Like, is every conversation, every conflict, is it worth sharing our opinion on? I don't think it is. I mean, there are some things, yes, we need to have conversations about it. We need to address conflict. We need to kind of get into the conversation. But a lot of times, you know, here's something I was just as we're talking here. Justin, think of the people that you respect, that are gentle people. In a conversation, with a group of people, are they someone that always shares their opinion about everything? They're not. Matter of fact, I bet you, because the people in my life that I have a lot of respect for, they're people who rarely share their opinion unless it's asked for. They don't address everything.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of respect for those people. And I kind of want to be that kind of one of those kind of people that, I don't have to address every topic, every conversation, and every group that I have. And from a leadership perspective, I read in a book somewhere, I forgot what book it was, but it's just a principle that stuck with me. A lot of times in a room, the quieter person seems to be the one that has the most wisdom in the room.
I think Proverbs even talks about that. Yeah.
Yeah. But the person that is sharing their opinion on everything, and they have to be right every time, people look at them in the room and they go, I don't know if they're the wisest person in the room.
It's interesting because you make a really good observation, because that gentleness, when that person does speak up, people listen. Because like, hey, you know what I'm saying? It's just different. And kind of those are great observations. Even the fact that I hear you saying too, that gentleness gives you perspective, like in whether it's a friendship, marriage, whatever, it's like, man, this relationship is more important than like I'm good, or I don't have to speak right now, or this is a moment I need to speak, but I'm going to do so. I mean,
well, and even our younger generation, our students, there's a man at our church, and they tell me all the time, Dusty, he doesn't say much, like you just said, but when he does say something, we sit on the edge of our seats.
That's right.
Now that's coming from our teenagers.
That's awesome.
He doesn't say much, but when he speaks, we listen.
Yeah.
And they're not talking about me, unfortunately. Yeah. That's not who they're talking about. They don't. A lot of times they don't listen to what I say, but that's okay. As long as I'm putting those kind of other people in their life, that's my job as a student pastor. But
that's good.
But yeah, that's they notice that, and they even teenagers respect someone that carries themselves with gentleness, and patience is another fruit of the Spirit, and self-control and kindness and all of those things that are mentioned in that passage.
They're powerful. They're against the grain.
They're powerful.
They are powerful, and that's what I hear you say. Like, people reckon it's different, and people don't see it often. And the illustrations you've shared with us today already, it's like, man, I want more gentleness in my life. I want to display that more, because that actually helps me. What I really want, we can feel real good. We're the coach just yelling at our kids. We feel good about it. We're accomplishing nothing, right? Like, well, actually we are, but it's to the negative.
Yeah.
We're not helping anything. But man, gentleness is of God. It's almost as if he knew what he was talking about. It's like challenging us to be peacemakers, make every effort to make peace, like you referenced earlier. So I love that. Man, those are great things to think about. And yeah, we need more gentleness in our life. And I think listening to you share today has been really helpful, because if we pay attention, here's what I love about the Spirit of God in us. If we pay attention, it gets exposed. It's not hard I think you said that earlier. Just, what'd you say? Like, watch how you, or pay attention to how you listen to yourself.
Listen to yourself. Yeah.
That's such good, because he does his job really well. Like, hey, not gentleness, right? Like, God doesn't speak in an audible voice, but it's like, he lets you know. I think he can put thoughts in our, like, we're off right here. This is wrong. Yeah. We're off track. And I love that. Or if you happen to, by the grace of God, respond with something in gentleness, and you see a situation that was starting to get heated, and you see it de-escalate, and you're like, wait a second. It's almost as if that proverb is for real, like a gentle answer. I just watched it turn away wrath. I've also seen, we're confessing, I've seen a harsh word of mine stir up anger in my wife, and immediately get rebuked of God and be like, you fool. Yeah. Like, you knew, like, that's a harsh word. What did you think? Like, there's your wisdom for the day. Like, you stirred that up. That's on you, bud. Like, man. And immediately, like, I was wrong. So I love that. And I love the benefit of gentleness, and even the goodness of God to rebuke us when we are not. So, man, Dusty, thank you. Anything else you want to share about gentleness?
No, man. Hey, I've enjoyed listening to the podcast, and you guys are doing a great job with just all the content, and it's just a refreshing thing to hear and just to be reminded that God's word is true. The Holy Spirit is at work in our life.
Amen.
And that He truly wants us to follow Him so that He can make much with our lives and the lives of other people. So
That's awesome.
So
I appreciate that. Good word. It's fitting. I think this will post on Election Day. So fitting for you to say it. I love that, because you're right, man. God is at work. His Spirit is at work in His people. And I'm grateful for that. And so thank you, my friend. And thank you for, man, I was excited about this because I've seen gentleness. I know you confessed moments where you weren't, but I just want to say I've seen that in your life. And I so appreciate you, because I've seen, whether it's conflict or just the way you handle things, I've seen that in your life, and I've really learned from you over the years just watching. So, man, thank you for being someone who, you may have failed some with gentleness or with the lack of it, but I've also seen it displayed in your life and learned from you. So appreciate you, my friend. Until next time, God bless.